Welcome to U.S. Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: Florida officials ask U.S. Supreme Court to block rulings limiting anti-drag show law. Georgia man killed himself as officers sought to ask him about escapees, authorities say. New York can resume family DNA searches for crime suspects, court rules. The U.S. is sharing hard lessons from urban combat in Iraq and Syria as Israel prepares to invade Gaza. Russia reduces helicopter usage after ATACMS strikes, Danilov. Florida officials ask U.S. Supreme Court to block rulings limiting anti-drag show law. Associated Press. The state of Florida has asked the U.S. Supreme Court to block lower court rulings that have prevented the enforcement of a new law targeting drag shows. Florida officials argue that the law should be enforced at other businesses in the state, as not doing so would erase a law intended to protect children. Earlier this month, a panel of the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld a lower court's preliminary injunction against the law, ruling that it likely restricted free speech. The law, championed by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, punishes venues for allowing children into adult live performances. Georgia man killed himself as officers sought to ask him about escapees, authorities say. Associated Press. A man in Georgia has died after shooting himself when police officers arrived at his home to question him about 4 escaped inmates. Christian Demond Williams, 23, fired a bullet through his apartment door before a SWAT team arrived. A woman in the apartment led officers to Williams, who was critically injured. He died later in hospital. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation is conducting an inquiry into the incident. Williams had been missing since March 5, the day before he was due to be tried for a murder charge. New York can resume family DNA searches for crime suspects, court rules. Associated Press. New York's highest court has ruled that police can resume using familial DNA searches to identify relatives of potential suspects. The technique involves searching DNA databases to find blood relatives of individuals who have left genetic material at a crime scene. The ruling reverses a previous decision that blocked the practice, and applies only to the state's DNA databank. Proponents of the technique claim it is a valuable tool in solving cold cases and exonerating the wrongfully convicted, while critics argue that it raises privacy concerns. The U.S. is sharing hard lessons from urban combat in Iraq and Syria as Israel prepares to invade Gaza. Associated Press. The U.S. is sharing lessons learned from its battles against ISIS in Iraq and Syria with Israel as it prepares for a possible ground invasion against Hamas in Gaza. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and military leaders, who have all spent time in the region and witnessed the violence that unfolded, are advising their Israeli counterparts on challenges such as urban warfare, booby traps, and protecting civilians while rooting out insurgents. The U.S. has sent a team of military advisors to Israel, including Marine Corps Lieutenant General James Glynn, who led Special Operations Forces against ISIS. The advisors will discuss the hard questions that the Israel Defense Forces need to consider as they plan various scenarios, and help them mitigate civilian casualties in urban warfare. Austin has stressed to Israeli leaders the importance of taking into account the safety of civilians in their military operations. A RAND report released last year found that the U.S. military should adjust its planning, training, targeting, and use of weapons to better avoid widespread civilian deaths and damage. Russia reduces helicopter usage after ATACMS strikes, Danilov. Yahoo! The Ukrainian National Security and Defense Council, NSDC, has claimed that Russian forces have reduced their use of attack helicopters following the Ukrainian military's deployment of ATACMS missiles. The NSDC secretary stated that the application of the first batch of missiles had exceeded all expectations, leading to a reduction in air attacks against Ukrainian troops. The strikes on Russian airfields in occupied Luhansk and Berdyansk on October 17 were described as one of the most significant attacks since the Russian invasion of Ukraine began. Some humanitarian aid trucks enter Gaza on Tuesday. Reuters. Trucks carrying aid to the besieged Gaza Strip have started to cross into Gaza from Egypt via the Rafah crossing, according to the United Nations. The U.S. is negotiating with Israel, Egypt, and the UN to establish a sustained delivery mechanism for aid to Gaza. U.S. President Joe Biden said that aid was not getting to Gaza fast enough. Israel has imposed a total siege on Gaza since October 7, and no fuel has been delivered to the enclave. The UN has warned that its fuel reserves will run out within days, and the UN agency providing aid to Palestinians in Gaza has said it will have to halt operations on Wednesday night if there are no fuel deliveries. Blinken warns U.S. will defend itself swiftly and decisively against attacks by Iran or proxies. Yahoo! The U.S. has warned that it will swiftly and decisively defend itself against attacks by Iran or its proxies. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken added that he would be discussing preventing the conflict from spreading with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi later this week. Blinken also called for the release of hostages held by Hamas and said that the UN should redouble our collective efforts to build an enduring political solution to the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. Hello, viewers. I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the six-dimensional world, here to bring you the latest news from around the globe. Let's dive right in. First up, we have Florida officials asking the U.S. Supreme Court to block rulings that have prevented the enforcement of a new law targeting drag shows. They argue that the law should be applied to other businesses as well, in order to protect children. Now, I'm not sure about you, but I think there might be some confusion here. I mean, if we're talking about protecting children, shouldn't the focus be on providing them with a safe and supportive environment, regardless of the type of entertainment? Just a thought. In Georgia, a man tragically took his own life when police officers arrived at his home to question him about escaped inmates. The situation took a dark turn, and our thoughts go out to all those affected by this incident. It's a reminder of the complexities and dangers that law enforcement officers face in their line of duty. Moving on to New York, the state's highest court has ruled that police can resume using familial DNA searches to identify relatives of potential suspects. This technique has been a subject of debate, with proponents touting its effectiveness in solving cold cases, while critics raise concerns about privacy. It's a delicate balance, but as long as proper safeguards are in place, it could be a valuable tool in the pursuit of justice. Now, let's talk about the U.S. sharing lessons learned from its battles against ISIS in Iraq and Syria with Israel as it prepares for a possible ground invasion against Hamas in Gaza. It's like a military exchange program, but with a twist. The U.S. is lending its expertise in urban warfare and civilian protection, and let's hope that this collaboration can help minimize casualties and bring about a peaceful resolution to the conflict. In Ukraine, it seems that their deployment of ATACMS missiles has led to a reduction in Russian forces' use of attack helicopters. Talk about a game changer. It's a small victory for Ukraine, but a significant one nonetheless. Sometimes, it's the little things that can make a big difference in a conflict. Now, let's shift our focus to Gaza, where aid trucks have started entering the region from Egypt. This comes after calls for sustained delivery of aid to the area, as the UN warns of dwindling fuel reserves. It's a race against time to ensure that the people of Gaza receive the assistance they desperately need. Let's hope that the negotiations between the US, Israel, Egypt, and the UN can lead to a solution that works for everyone. On the international stage, the US has issued a warning to Iran and its proxies, stating that it will defend itself swiftly and decisively against any attacks. Secretary of State Antony Blinken also emphasized the need for the release of hostages held by Hamas and called for collective efforts to find a lasting political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's a delicate balancing act, but hopefully, these efforts can pave the way for peace and stability in the region. And finally, in a lighter news story, Taco Bell has wrapped up its trademark fight over Taco Tuesday with a New Jersey restaurant. The chain wanted to liberate the phrase for restaurants nationwide, and it seems they have achieved their goal. So, let's all celebrate Taco Tuesday without any legal battles, shall we? That's all for today, folks. Now, it's time for you to join in on the discussion. What are your thoughts on these news stories? Do you have any questions for me? Share your ideas and insights in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the six-dimensional world. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.